A spiritual journey. The most important decision of my life involved getting on a city bus. Growing up, there were many things my mother couldn't give me. She dropped out of high school to work full time and take care of my older sister and myself. Years later, I learned that she was pregnant with a little boy no more than a year after I was born. He was stillborn the cord wrapping around his neck during delivery. For my mother, life was a constant set of challenges with limited resources. But the one thing she was able to give me was God. Every Sunday, a bus would ride through the Coke Street housing projects and pick up anyone willing to get on. This was a gift to my mother, which he passed on to me each week. She would walk my sister and I out to the corner and put us on it. She didn't have to worry about our safety because the bus only had one destination, and from the moment we got on it until the moment we returned home, we were under the care of Pastor C.L. Jackson of the Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. Pleasant Grove Baptist Church still stands on Contley Street, about a 10-minute ride from Coke Street. But for me, as a young child, those 10 minutes were the difference between the hell of poverty and the heaven of faith. My connection to God began as a connection to C.L. Jackson. He was a 10th grade dropout, but he was an intelligent and genuine man who was able to make the idea of God digestible to a child. When he spoke, I listened. When he taught me why prayer was important, I understood. And when he told me that God would take care of me, I believed him. Like most Black Baptist churches, the choir was an important part of the ministry. All week long, I'd fuss and fight my way through life just to get to church on Sunday. I started to look forward to it. Service was relief, and the choir was the warm honey my spirit needed. The music would touch me to the point where I'd find myself singing the hymns during the week when I needed something to soothe me. My mother was working a lot and rarely home, leaving my sister and I to fend for ourselves. Often we'd go hungry. I'd walk around the neighborhood in tears, singing, "Lord, do it. Lord, do it. Do it for me right now," letting the word help stave off my hunger until my mother made it home. After my sister died and I moved to my grandmother's house, I was so full of conviction that I made the single most important decision of my life. I was no longer living in the projects, so there was no church bus every week, but I needed to be close to the Lord. By then, church had become a regular part of my life. I couldn't even imagine my week without it. So one Sunday morning at 11 years old, I got myself up, got dressed, went out to the corner, and paid 10 cents to catch the city bus to church. I've done a lot in my life, much of which I'll share in the pages to come. But no single act is more defining of who I am as a person than that moment right there. I am willing to do whatever it takes to get what I need. My relationship with God was strengthened through Pleasant Grove and would only grow stronger throughout the rest of my life. My faith gave me a moral compass, direction in a world of chaos, and because of it, I was always able to stay on course even when everyone around me appeared lost. Believing in something bigger than myself brought me comfort and added purpose to my life. When you're acting within your purpose, with your divine conviction, nothing can stop you. Even though we didn't have a lot of material things, my family always had my back. Through the years, I've seen that if push came to shove, I wasn't shoving alone. My family has gone to war with me and for me, and that is an amazing feeling. Now imagine that feeling multiplied by 1,000,000. God is the reason I move without fear, the reason I've been able to take the risks I've taken. I've seen moments that defied any explanation than God's grace and mercy. But faith alone is not enough. Right now, if you travel through any housing projects in America, I guarantee you'll find some of God's strongest believers. Life in general, but especially for the impoverished and disenfranchised, is far too hard to do alone. Each day holds a promise of hope or despair, and oftentimes a little bit of both. While I've come to trust in God's will be done, I've also come to understand that faith without works is dead. I would not be where I am today without God and without the work ethic that God allowed my family to instill in me. Believing is not enough. I've seen miracles, but I don't wait on them. Just as I had to make a decision to move to my grandmother's instead of rotting in my mother's grief-stricken apartment, or getting up on a Sunday morning while everyone else slept and taking the city bus to go hear the word, I had to make a decision that I was going to lift myself out of poverty. I knew there was something more than the life in front of me. I knew there was a much bigger world out there. I knew it because I'd seen it on a ride to prison. Escape to the penitentiary. There are 65.9 miles between Houston and Huntsville, Texas. That's a little over an hour drive. However, in my grandmother's car, it was more like a 2-hour drive since she didn't move that fast. These trips helped set the course of my life. My uncle, Lonzo Johnson, known to us as Hamp, was incarcerated for most of my childhood. Unfortunately, this wasn't unusual for an African American male. The penitentiary is so ingrained in our lives that many of us approach the possibility of incarceration not as if, but as when. To understand the gravity of this, you have to truly wrap your mind around the idea of being housed in a box, a literal cage. That is what life is like for millions of men and women in this country, living as caged animals. And while some of them truly are a threat to society, they are far more locked up for drug addictions. They only a threat to themselves. My Uncle Hamp was locked up for burglary routinely. I'd get into my grandmother's late model Ford Taurus, and we drive the 2 hours to see him. Thankfully, I've never had to visit any of my children in prison, so I can only imagine the pain my grandmother felt driving those long hours to see her only son. For me, the trip was something totally different. In a bizarre irony, the trip to the penitentiary was nothing short of a vacation for me. It was my chance to get out of the hood, to see the world, to encounter people who didn't look like me, sound like me, or experience the world the same way I did. And most importantly, those road trips exposed me to land. I was always outdoorsy. I loved to hunt and fish. I'd swim in the summer up until the day I almost drowned the pool across from Coke Street. And of course, I kept my chickens and roosters outside, but I hadn't really seen the country outside of Houston until we began taking those journeys to Huntsville. We'd ride for hours looking at nothing but lush green grass, thousands of trees, my world expanding with each mile. The bookends of my trip, the ghetto and the prison, were nothing compared to the endless possibilities of who I could become in between. Land became important. It represented peace, space to do something with my life, and ownership. It was during one of these trips that I said, "Grandma, I'm going to own some land like this one day." My grandmother just looked at me like I was crazy. I was only 9 years old then, but the seeds of success had already been planted. That's what many people never understand. Failure has birthed far more champions than privilege. I am the man I am today not just because of what I had early in life, but also because of what I didn't have. Looking back on it now, I understand how important it is for every child, not just the impoverished, to travel outside of their surroundings. Those trips taught me perspective and exposed me to how other people live. It expanded my goals. I didn't just want to buy my mother a house. Now I wanted to buy her some land with a home on it. I had even larger dreams for myself. I didn't just want to own a few acres. I wanted to own more land than the eye could see. I wanted to own enough land to make sure the space between the hood and the penitentiary was wider than I'd ever be able to cross in my lifetime. Ernest and Adam. People in the South are often exposed to sex at younger ages. Perhaps that's because there's less distractions in rural areas, or because we get married at younger ages. Or perhaps there's a greater emphasis on family and settling down sooner, so you're more aware of it. I'm sure the over-sexualization of African Americans during the slave trade also plays a large part in the complex and often contradictory attitude towards sex in the South. And these contradictions often affect the most vulnerable among us. Rapes and molestations often go unreported or unpunished. Many of these things that are common today were taboo enough in the 1960s to leave you socially ostracized or even killed. Sex was the one thing everyone did, but no one knew how to talk about it properly. Sharon Johnson was at work at Big J's bowling alley the night Adam Hackett and Ernest Prince walked in. She noticed nothing out of the ordinary about the two best friends. They sat in her section and made small talk as she took their order. Sharon was 15 and already the mother of a 3-month-old girl, Zanya. The relationship between Sharon and her daughter's father was over, and her focus was on adjusting to life. As a teenage mother, she just returned to high school and was determined to finish something that no one in her family had been able to accomplish. Her mother, Vera, wasn't particularly happy about Sharon's pregnancy, but was committed to helping raise her grandchild as long as Sharon held down a job. One night in the fall of 1963, Sharon saw Adam Hackett again. She was hanging out with her friend Anna Marie at Julia C. Hester House, a local community center that threw dances for area teens in hopes of keeping them off the streets and out of trouble. Sharon and Anna Marie were neighbors. Like most teenage girls, they were into music, hanging out with their friends, and talking to young men. Ernest Prince struck up a conversation with Anna Marie, and Adam took a liking to Sharon. That night would be the start of a lifelong bond between the four of them. Adam and Sharon began dating. Adam's family wasn't happy that he was dating a girl with a baby, but Adam didn't seem to mind, often spending time with young Zanya. Adam was born in Louisiana in 1944, the second oldest of 9 children. He was a straightforward guy from a hard-working family who always held down at least one job. His father was stern, some might even say mean, which made him hard to live with. So Adam, who never had less than 2 jobs, moved out on his own at 17 years old, renting an apartment with his best friend, Ernest. He loved Sharon, and when she became pregnant in January of 1964, Adam was supportive, eagerly awaiting the birth of his first child. By this time, Adam had fallen out with Ernest and moved in with his sister. Still, Sharon visited often as their love for one another grew. On Halloween morning, 1964, Sharon was at home when she began having pains. Her cousin drove her to Jefferson Davis Hospital, where she was checked out and sent home. She was in labor, but not far enough along. A few hours later, while experiencing more powerful contractions, Sharon caught the bus by herself and returned to the hospital only to be released an hour later. Finally, Sharon was in her mother's bed that evening when her water broke. She was admitted to the hospital shortly before I was born. Adam arrived sometime later, overjoyed to meet his son. Houston was experiencing a bitter cold spell, and Vera's house was out of gas. 14-month-old Zania was sent to stay with her father's family, while Sharon and her newborn son, which was me, left the hospital. Headed for my Aunt Teddy, there was an adjustment period. Sharon now had 2 children at 16, and Adam had a family to provide for, but they did the best they could. For a while, before breaking up, Sharon returned to her mother's house, although she continued dating Adam off and on for many years to come. The separation never stopped Adam from being present in my life. He still made sure I spent time with my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I was loved and treated like everyone else in the family. Only there was one thing. Anna Marie, my mother's best friend, began commenting on how much I favored her ex-boyfriend, Ernest. I was small with dark brown skin and a thin, muscular frame. My mother dismissed the remarks. She said I looked just like Adam and made sure Anna Marie never said anything around me. I was in the 9th grade when I met Sheldon Harris and her cousin Rhonda Prince, who were a few years younger than me. They were cute little girls, and I wanted to talk to them both, but I ended up talking to Sheldon. She had long, pretty hair and a sweet smile, and she liked me too. We walked home after school and talked on the phone, and eventually she asked for a picture of me so she could show her mother. I obliged because at that point I was going to do anything Sheldon asked me to do. I liked her that much. That night, she called me, and I heard her mother in the background saying, "That boy looks exactly like Ernest Prince." Ernest was Rhonda's daddy, but I knew him as someone who occasionally hung around my mother. Of course, I told my mother what she said, and she dismissed it. "Adam Hackett is your father," she said, and then she ended the conversation. It wasn't something that stuck with me at the time. For 13 years, I had no reason to doubt that Adam was my daddy, but later that year, in the summer, my mother took me to the Prince family reunion. Family reunions are a big deal, especially in the South. Relatives from all over the world gather together for days of fellowship and barbecue. It's not uncommon to invite family friends to join the camaraderie. But imagine walking into a house full of people who all look exactly like you. I didn't know what to make of it. Everyone was welcoming, friendly, and treated me like any other guest. But that night, as I returned to my grandmother's house, I was confused, angry. It felt like a funeral was happening inside of me. That's the best way to describe it. It felt like death. Still, my mother denied that Ernest was my father. It wasn't so much that she was trying to deceive me. She was trying to protect me. I loved Adam, and Adam loved me. Our bond as father and son was as strong as any other family. But the sense of doubt growing inside me made me feel like our bond was slowly dying. I was losing that sense of security, of identity, and no amount of reassurance from my mother could bring it back. It changed me. It's a heck of a thing to question your own paternity. It's not something I wish on my worst enemy. As a child, your first basic knowledge of yourself is your name and the name of your mother and father. Now, my father's name was followed by a question mark. Whether my mother knew it or even wanted to admit it, that night after the family reunion, I knew Adam Hackett wasn't my blood daddy. Ernest Prince was fearless. The third of 9 children, he had a natural finesse about him. A natural born leader, he always had a crew and a girlfriend. He'd even dated one of his teachers in high school and wasn't afraid of getting caught. He was only afraid she'd get too attached. He was a natural wanderer. In the 9th grade, Ernest went to New York to live with his older brother, Donald. Ernest immediately fell into his hustle. Shooting dice was his thing. He was good at it, and soon everyone came to know it. Ernest would walk into a dice game with nothing and leave with over $100, which was a lot of money in 1960. Ernest met Anna Marie, or Slim as he called her, the same night Sharon met Adam. And just like my parents, Ernest and Slim would deal with one another off and on pretty much the rest of their lives. Still, that spirit of restlessness ran deep within Ernest. One night, Ernest asked his brother Donald to drop him off in Hunts Point in the Bronx. It was 1968. There was nothing but trouble in Hunts Point. But Ernest assured his brother he knew what he was doing. Ernest came home hours later with hundreds of dollars and a car. The deed signed over by a man who couldn't shoot dice nearly as well as Ernest. "Check this out," Ernest said, stretching his arm out and pointing to a small red puncture on the inside of his elbow. "What's that?" Donald asked. When the loser ran out of money, he'd pay Ernest in heroin. Donald made Ernest promise not to try heroin again. That's some bad stuff, and you don't want to be mixed up in that. Ernest gave his word, and being a man of his word was good enough for his brother. Donald, who was fresh out of the service, moved to Oakland, California. Nearly a decade would pass before Ernest admitted to his brother that he'd been using heroin long before that night in Hunts Point. I don't remember actually meeting Ernest Prince. He was always on the outskirts of my life. I knew him as Anna Marie boyfriend. One day, when I was 9 years old and Zania was 10, Ernest picked us up and took us fishing. My mother and his grandmother, Momo, came along. We spent the entire day out at the lake. I remember Momo catching fish after fish, to the point where I went over to her side because I couldn't catch even a nibble. She just laughed as she watched me. I still couldn't catch a thing, but I remember her smile being enough. She felt warm. That entire day felt warm. It didn't feel strange to me at all. I didn't see Momo again until the day Anna Marie walked my mother and I into the Prince family reunion. Some 6 years later, she was just as warm, only now it felt strange. After the family reunion, I changed. Like I said, I felt like a part of me had died. I loved Adam Hackett, and I loved his wife, Pat. You see, Adam and Pat met years before I was born. Pat was a good girl from a good family, and Adam told her right away he was going to marry her. Eventually, he kept his word and proposed. Of course, she said yes, but a few months into the engagement, Adam confessed to Pat that he had a 2-year-old son. Pat was devastated, but she was also in love, so she asked to meet me. It was love at first sight. Even to this day, Pat exudes a warmth and kindness that draws everyone in, even my mother, who'd been dating Adam without knowing he was engaged, couldn't dislike Pat. Pat loved me since the first time she saw me, but she had heard the rumblings that Adam may not be my father. She'd asked my mother, "Is this boy Adam's? Because I'm going to marry Adam Hackett, and I plan to love this little boy like my own." My mother told her yes, and that was all Pat needed to hear. Pat took me everywhere. She made running errands and trips to the grocery store feel like an adventure. I loved her and my daddy, and after the family reunion, I was afraid I would lose them both. Once Adam found out about Ernest, There would be no more running errands with Pat. My entire world would change. I began to mourn, a feeling which would stick with me for years to come. I felt like I was losing my daddy. I wanted to talk to Pat, but I couldn't. I couldn't talk to anyone, so I mourned alone. Over time, I started going over to the Prince house. Adam and I weren't getting along. I was in the streets more than I was in school, and he didn't respect hustling, so we were keeping our distance from one another. Still, even though I didn't tell my mom or Pat, I liked visiting the Prince house. I liked being around Momo, Ernest's grandmother, Nano, and all of his brothers. It felt right in ways I didn't even know how to explain. For one thing, Ernest and I were a lot alike. Aside from the fact that I looked just like him, we were both hustlers who never took our mind off a dollar. We both loved the streets and had an intuition which saved both of our lives on more than one occasion. I don't recall there ever being a formal conversation about Ernest Prince being my father. No one ever sat me down and explained anything to me. Eventually, Adam caught wind of the amount of time I was spending with Ernest, and that was a problem. As far as my mother and Pat were concerned, Adam Hackett was my one and only father. They didn't care how much circumstantial evidence I presented. In their eyes, I was Adam's boy. End of story. I look back on it now with a sense of irony. All the years I spent in mourning, thinking that accepting Ernest Prince would mean losing Adam Hackett, couldn't have been farther from the truth. As I'm writing this book, I've realized how valuable both Adam and Ernest were in my life. If it hadn't been for the discipline and structure Adam instilled in me and the lessons he taught me about respect, I couldn't be the man that I am today. I'm forever grateful to him for the unconditional love he shared with me. I'm thankful to Ernest for bringing me into this world and for all the wisdom he shared with me along the way. He gave me confidence and helped me realize that I was wiser than I even knew. Most of all, I can't even begin to explain how much meeting the relatives on the Prince side of my family filled a void in my life. I was able to spend time with my 114th-year-old great-grandmother, Momo, who shared a lot of wisdom with me, and also Ernest's mother, Nano, and so many other uncles and cousins, too many to name. I would advise anyone who is living without meeting their mother or father to find them. Number one, you don't want to cross the bloodlines and end up dating one of your family members because you didn't know any better. Number two, where your health is concerned, it's such an advantage to be able to observe the genetics of those who have gone before you. It wasn't until I was 22 years old that Adam and Ernest made their peace. It was around the time I opened a car lot. I'd always had a passion for cars, and I was dating a girl whose father was a car salesman and helped me get a dealer's license. I learned the rules of the car business quickly and became the most profitable dealership among 20 or so dealerships on Shepherd Street. I knew because all of us used the same accountant. Ernest and his brother Larry often came by the car lot to hang out. One day, Adam showed up. He was agitated, and you could see a pistol sticking out of his waistband of his pants. In Texas, in the late 1980s, carrying a gun was common, especially for Adam. But on this day, he wanted Ernest to know he had a strap. He asked to speak with him outside. From what we could hear, Adam told Ernest to stay away from me. He said that I was his son, and he didn't want Ernest hanging around. Ernest told Adam he couldn't do that. He respected Adam, but that was asking too much. "He's my son, Adam," was the last thing we heard Ernest say before the two former best friends moved out of earshot. Larry and I watched from inside as they talked for 15 more minutes. Finally, they reached some sort of peace, and they embraced. We didn't know it at the time, but Adam was sick. He smoked 2 packs of menthol cigarettes a day throughout my entire life, and lung cancer was eating him alive. When Adam died a few months later, I was right there to comfort Pat and make sure my father had a proper burial. But I was a prince all along and didn't even know it. Looking back, I'm thankful for both of my fathers who have since left this planet and crossed over to heaven. Leaders, followers, and loners, I'm a natural born leader.
Hard not to be a little jealous of James Smith. At the age of 28, this young man who grew up in the Houston ghetto is now a self-made millionaire.
I think it's a conspiracy going on with the police officers conspiring against ghetto boys all over the world who beat the system. And what I mean by beat the system is beginning to have a little money where they're not controlled by, you being an athlete or something like that they can come and watch and enjoy. I think they want to destroy you.
Me and my sister, we was together every day, right? So that particular subject that I wrote about in the book, I think The Closet and the Vacuum, was the last night that she and I spent together. And I had no idea that was gonna be our last night, but it was a strange night. And a lot of times people say, that last day with their loved ones, that have death on them, or of course God know that's their last night with you. Maybe something happened different that don't happen normally. And I tried to explain that in the book just to relate, so people could relate to, the realness of the event that had took place. And we found ourselves staying up to 1 o'clock or something that night when we normally go to bed at 9 or 10. So that's abnormal. So it's almost as if like God knew this your last night with your sister. I'm gonna allow y'all to travel, and talk about your dreams and everything together, because after this night, you won't see her no more. He knew that, I didn't know it. So, we found ourselves talking about that chapter I wrote about a vacuum in a house, because, during our conversation, we was talking about what we wanted to buy my mother when we got grown. And my sister said, I want to buy a vacuum. But my sister used to have to clean up that whole apartment and do a lot of sweeping, right? And, that was work. All I had to do was take the garbage out and clean the bathroom. That was my chores. So she said she wanted to buy my mom a vacuum. I wanted to, at the age of 11 years old, 10, 11, whatever I was, I used to hear my mother around, in the project, Coke apartment projects, saying I want a home one day, I want a house. You know what I mean? So I would be just sitting back listening to conversations about I want a house. So bam, I'm like, I want to give mom a house.
He was at the top of the class back then, So at the end of the day, you get the big kingpin dudes, the big dudes that's respected, that done did a lot for the neighborhood, and did a lot for the city, And also, is the motherfucking beast, in them streets. You heard about, the shit that had happened to people back in the day, So when you hear those stories and you see how you move, that big motherfucker scared of you.
They cool and all that, but this ain't Trey.
And man, I must have got so damn scared and then dipped. I left the city. Because I'd done enough pranks to know that this wasn't, you can feel it. I can't explain it, but you can feel somebody's energy over the phone. And he was not playful. Real niggas don't play. They ain't got time for chuckles.
DEA has been harassing me and saying things for a long time, but for them to go to the extent where they have to do dirty, things like this and plant dope on me, that upsets me a lot.